The most important characteristic of blonde hair is that it is bright. And because of that, when drawing it on paper, it tends to fade into the white of the paper. And that can be solved with two simple methods. The first one would be to add a background to it. If you add a background to your drawing, then when you are drawing blonde hair, it will create an immediate difference between the brighter hair and the darker background, and you won't have to worry that the hair will fade. The difference will be strong enough for everyone to see it. And the second version, the second method would be to not add a background, but add more contrast to the hair, add more definition to it, add more weight to it. You exaggerate the shadows, the natural shadows of the hair. You just make them a bit darker. For instance, here you have these shadows right there, those darker colors, those darker grays, that darker value, and it adds a very nice definition to this part of the hair on the white background. You see the background is white, but you also notice the presence of the hair. You see that it's there, you feel that it's heavy, it has a definition, it has volume, it has shape, it has depth. For this tutorial, we are going to use the white background, and we're going to add more contrast to our reference. Drawing blonde hair is the most time consuming because you want to start with um, the bright tones, the bright shades of gray, and work your way towards the darker areas, the darker values, because you can always add an extra layer, you can always darken the drawing, but once you pass a certain point in value, you can't simply erase it and draw over it again without damaging the paper and the quality of the finished drawing. So you want to be paying attention to how much pressure you're applying on the pencil to not make too dark lines too early. You want to start out bright and work your way up the ladder to dark. As you see, I've already made the grid, and I've already done the outline of the hair on the bigger grid on the paper. And I'm going to start with this hairlock right here. There. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to follow the flow of the hair and avoid the highlights areas. In this case, it would be here and here. So how do I avoid that? Well, I'm going to start from the bottom, and I'm going to follow the flow of the hair. Don't want to add too much from the beginning. I want to add very bright tones, very bright values. Afterwards, I'm going to move my way towards the darker values. You see, I'm following the flow of the hair. My hand is moving like an arched line, and I'm applying pressure in this area. And as I'm moving my hand towards the highlight, I am slowly lifting my hand, removing pressure, and that's how you make this gradient effect of the line, that blending in effect. Some areas are darker, so I am using more pressure at certain spots than others. You see, here is a bit more of the darker area, and here also. So I want to do that correctly. I'm constantly checking to see if I'm doing as it is in the reference. I don't want to make any mistakes, and if I do make them, I want to be able to erase them or draw over them without having too many problems. Now, after I've done this much in this area, I can move my way towards this area. As you see, there is this very dark gap between the hairs here and here. I'm not going to draw it here, but I am going to suggest it. I'm just going to add a few lines like so. And then again, just a few accent lines. That would be it. Now, I'm going to start this line, and I'm not going to leave this out because I'm going to create this line with the eraser afterwards. So let's get started. Always make sure your lead is long enough so you can draw, but not too long so it will break. So I've made that area, and now I'm working my way on the other areas, but I'm not making it too dark from the beginning. I'm overlaying layer and layer over it. And yes, I'm adding small lines here and there, for instance here and here, because they represent gaps between the hairs, and that's why you want to put them on the paper. So now we can move on to this area right here. Let me adjust this again. Not enough. There we go. So, as you can see, this part is darker. We have the highlights here, and this combination between highlight and gap between the hair of the background. So we are going to follow the curve of the hair and move the pencil in a circular motion. We want to capture the texture of the hair. We want to capture its flow. And that's why I said that drawing blonde hair takes time, because you are adding layer over layer, and each layer needs attention, each layer needs time, each layer needs some adjustments afterwards, and all of that takes time. And now, going on the other side, we're doing the same thing. Now, you see, there's this area where it's darkened more than this area. That's because in the background there's that dark value, and you see through the hair right here. And here you have hair that actually captures some light. So we are going to make that, but not that obviously. We are not going to add that much of a dark value to it, but we are going to make it nonetheless. If you find that drawing at a certain angle is difficult for you, you can turn the paper, you can rotate it so that the angle of the hand is more comfortable when drawing. There. Now, we can work our way from this area up, or we can start working on another area. I think that we should draw this part for now because there are a lot of interesting things happening in this region. You see that there's this curl that's overlaying these two behind it, and there is that gap here that continues right out here, and that's already drawn. So I'm going to position this like so. You can always check your graphite. If it's not sharp enough, you can take a piece of paper and start hatching so it has a bit of an edge, so you can draw thinner lines afterwards. You see that this line here is very bright and is thick enough so you can leave it out and not draw underneath it. So I'm leaving it out, and I started to add lines, add a value right next to it. I'm following the curve of the line, the curve of the hair, the curve of the locks, and it's slowly starting to catch shape. Now you see that after finishing these two, there is this little part here that's also pretty dark in value, so we're gonna add that too. We're gonna start off with the lower part, like so, and then, as I said, I'm applying pressure at the beginning and then removing my hand from the paper and creating that gradient at the end. So pressure, then slowly remove pressure as you move your hand. And that's how you create this gradient, this blend of grays. And I'm drawing these little lines here because blonde hair has parts where the highlights are very thin and areas where the highlights overlay non-highlighted hair, so to speak. especially in this region also, you will see that effect is quite common. So that's why I'm not making that much of a blend, but I'm making sure that the difference between these individual lines isn't that big. So we have that. Now, starting to catch shape. Now, let's work on this region right here for a bit. Let me just adjust the camera a bit. There we go. So as you see, you have these values right there, here, and here. They are basically the same values, so you have to pay attention to that, not make any of them darker. But since you have highlights overlaying each other, you have to exaggerate some parts. You have to make some hair strands darker than they really are, just so you can suggest their presence within the drawing. Don't worry if you draw over highlights at this phase, because you can always use the eraser and correction fluid to correct that, to erase some of the pencil work, some of the values added, and to remake the highlights. Now I may be exaggerating here, but that's because I don't have the value for the skin. And even if you do have the value for the skin, as you can see, it's easy to mistake these values and not notice the difference. That's when you add a little line underneath the hair so that you can bring it out more, you can make it alive, you can make its presence felt. So that, and I want to add a bit of value here. I want to correct this line. I want to make that line more obvious. So I'm making these fine little lines there. I'm creating a line with many little lines, as you can see. And the same thing here. And now, since you have darker values here and here, you can make the midtone between these two highlights. You can make that midtone, and if need be, you can make the surroundings a bit darker. Now, you might notice that some areas are a bit darker than they should normally be, but that's because the camera won't record anything too bright. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to make some lines or some areas intentionally more darker than they should be. But that's so just you can understand the technique and the process behind it. You don't have to do it like this when you're drawing for yourself. You always start from bright and move your way to dark. I'm making it darker so you can see it. And there are these little lines every here and there. For instance, here, here, here. Let me show you that better. Here, 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 here are a bunch. And you will notice that there are these brighter hair strands that are overlaying our darker values. That's something you achieve by using an eraser. So we are not currently interested in avoiding drawing over certain hair strands. We are now just interested in making the drawing work. At this phase, you want the values to be correct, and the details are left for the end. Now, because I have already added this much value here, I can finish off this area right here and then move on to adding the highlights.
Alright, so if you like this video, please do me a huge favor and give it a thumbs up. And also, make sure to subscribe to this channel to get access to even more cool lessons. And lastly, if you want to get more free step-by-step tutorials, go to mydrawingtutorials.com/bonus and sign up for my free newsletter. Or you can simply click the link below and just enter your email on the new page that pops up. So once again, just click the link below, enter your email, and get access to all my free lessons.